Operation Ajax, the CIA coup. That America denied for 60 years Iran had a democratically elected prime minister who nationalized the country's oil industry, taking control away from a British company that had been profiting from it for decades. Britain asked the United States for help removing him. The CIA organized and funded a coup, paid protesters to riot in the streets, and overthrew Iran's own elected government, then spent the next 60 years formally denying any involvement at all. In 1951, Mohammad Mosaddegh, having been formally elected Prime Minister of Iran through the country's own established parliamentary process, moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry, specifically targeting the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British-controlled enterprise that had maintained substantial control over Iran's considerable oil production and revenue for decades, an action Mosaddegh and considerable Iranian public support viewed as a genuinely legitimate assertion of national economic sovereignty over the country's own natural resources, but one that Britain's government viewed as a direct, serious threat to significant established British commercial and strategic interests within the country. Britain, having exhausted more conventional diplomatic and economic pressure specifically intended to reverse Mossadegh's nationalization decision without achieving the outcome it actually sought, formally approached the United States government specifically requesting American assistance in organizing a covert operation intended to remove Mosaddegh from power entirely, a request the American government, particularly following Dwight Eisenhower's 1953 inauguration, and the new administration's genuinely significant, sustained Cold War-era concern regarding potential Soviet influence within Iran given Mossadegh's own complex political relationship with Iran's domestic Communist Party, ultimately agreed to support. The resulting operation, formally codenamed Operation Ajax by the CIA and TPAJAX by British intelligence services, involved the CIA providing substantial covert funding and coordination, specifically intended to organize domestic Iranian opposition to Mossadegh's government, including funding and organizing paid protesters and organized street demonstrations specifically intended to create the public appearance of genuine, widespread domestic Iranian opposition to Mossadegh's continued rule, alongside more direct efforts to secure the cooperation of key Iranian military officers willing to actively support Mossadegh's removal from power. The operation's actual execution in August of 1953 proved genuinely, initially uncertain in its prospects for success, since an early attempt to formally dismiss Mosaddegh through a royal decree issued by Iran's monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, whose own cooperation the CIA had specifically secured as a central element of the broader operation, initially failed when Mossadegh's own supporters and loyal military units resisted this first attempt, forcing the Shah himself to briefly flee the country entirely as the operation's initial phase appeared to have failed. Despite this significant initial setback, the CIA organized effort continued, and the combination of sustained paid street demonstrations, direct financial payments to key military commanders, and coordinated pressure eventually succeeded in reversing the operation's early failure, with pro-Shah military forces successfully securing control of key government facilities and formally removing Mossaddegh from power within days of the initial setback, allowing the Shah to return to Iran and resume his position with considerably strengthened direct American and British backing. Following the coup's ultimate success, the Shah's subsequent government proved considerably more accommodating to Western oil interests than Mossadegh's nationalization policy had been, while simultaneously ruling with increasingly centralized authoritarian personal authority over the following decades, a governing approach that, while providing genuine, sustained Western strategic access to Iranian oil resources and broader regional influence throughout the Cold War period, also generated considerable, sustained domestic Iranian political resentment regarding both the Shah's specific governing methods and the broader historical memory of direct foreign intervention in removing Iran's own democratically elected government. The United States government formally officially denied any direct involvement in Operation Ajax for decades, following the actual 1953 coup, maintaining this formal denial even as historians and researchers studying the period gradually developed increasingly detailed, credible circumstantial evidence regarding the CIA's actual central role until 2013, when the CIA itself formally officially acknowledged its direct role in planning and executing the coup for the first time, releasing declassified internal documents that provided definitive official confirmation of the agency's actual central involvement, 60 years after the operation's actual execution. This eventual formal acknowledgement arrived considerably too late to meaningfully affect the operation's genuine, substantial historical and political consequences within Iran itself, since the coup's broader legacy, the specific historical memory of direct American and British intervention, removing Iran's own democratically elected government specifically to protect Western oil interests, remained a genuinely significant, sustained factor in Iran's subsequent political development, frequently cited by historians studying the period as a genuinely significant contributing factor to the specific anti-American sentiment that would eventually help drive Iran's own considerably more severe 1979 revolution, which itself formally, permanently ended the Shah's American-backed government entirely. What makes Operation Ajax endure as one of history's most significant examples of covert foreign intervention isn't simply the operation's specific tactical execution itself, genuinely significant as that execution ultimately proved, but the specific, sustained decades-long formal denial that followed, and the genuinely substantial, lasting political consequences that formal denial couldn't actually prevent or delay, a coup whose true nature the American government successfully concealed from formal public acknowledgement for 60 years, even as its actual historical consequences continued shaping Iranian and broader Middle Eastern politics considerably more directly and immediately than any formal American denial could ever actually control. If stories like this, where a government successfully hid its own role in overthrowing a foreign democracy for 60 years, while the consequences of that same hidden operation kept shaping history regardless, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to the grave details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.